Hello, my name is Michael O'Keefe, aka The Movie Wizard. If you enjoy this interview and want to hear more top-notch film industry conversations, please press the thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and hit the bell to stay in the know. Matt Gallagher, tell me about your documentary, Prey.
So, Prey is a film that has been sort of percolating for about a decade or so, and it's a film about clergy sex abuse. It's a documentary on clergy sex abuse. So, if you've ever seen the drama Spotlight, it's kind of like that, but it's the real life version of how we sort of quantify and figure out how much how do we deal with victims of clergy sex abuse. So it's told through the eyes of a plaintiff who is bringing the church to task. He's bringing the church to court in a civil court. This is our film. Our film starts after the criminal trial is done and after the priest has gone to jail. What happens is there's a civil action, and all these victims and survivors begin suing the church. And so I was always curious about that sort of storyline, and so I reached out to a lawyer, and the rest is sort of in the film.
All right, so why do you think Catholics get so triggered by the fact that their church does do this cover up, pedophilia, instead of trying to reform it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge question. I think that it's a very complicated thing. I mean, I think what we know for sure is that it did happen, and what we know for sure is that the church hasn't been handling it well within their own ranks, and so I think what's happening now is you're seeing a lot of people pushing from the outside of the church to affect some sort of change within the church, and the church has always been resistant to change. But I think that I think Catholics are sort of concerned and wondering, if their dollars that they donate every Sunday morning in the baskets of the churches are being used for good, or are they being used to sort of pay off these large legal settlements and lawyers that work for the church. So I think that I think that Catholics and people in general are sort of wondering what's going on.
Yeah. Would you personally advocate for Catholics to stop donating to their church?
I'm going to leave it to them. I mean, I was born and raised a Catholic. I was an altar boy in Windsor, Ontario, and I know I come from a strong Catholic family. My parents are very, very Catholic, and they still go to church every Sunday, and they still donate their $20 or whatever it is. I think the church works for a lot of people. I think it definitely works for people like my parents. But that's such a personal choice. I mean, I'm not going to suggest that people stop donating, but I think if they did stop donating, I think the church might pay attention a lot quicker, and I think the church needs to pay attention to more of this.
Yeah, no, I'm sensitive to that, and I have religious people in my life, but it also should be stated that if you're donating to the Catholic Church, some of that money is going to go to probably cover up, the acts of sex offenders.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what the real problem is. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of survivors and victims over the course of the last couple of years making this film, and it's the survivors often say, listen, it's not so much the abuse that is the sickening part, although that's tragic and very hard to understand. But it's the cover up, and it's the way that the church has dealt with the victims when these people try to sort of come forward and say, hey, listen, we got a problem with this priest. Who is this priest, and where else did he go? And these victims and survivors are starting to to sort of see what happened and see how the church has been just trying to quietly hush these matters up and move the priest around, and so nobody complains. I mean, I think the cover up is if the church is ever going to, have a reckoning, I think it'll be due to the cover up and not the pedophilia.
Okay. Yeah, and another thing I've heard is like, oh, like they're kind of like out to get us. Like they're kind of singling out Catholic. It's like an anti-Catholic thing. There's pedophiles of all shades of colors, but it's like you said, the cover up thing, which does come down to money, is the story. That is the story, right?
Well, I spent a lot of time interviewing the lawyer in my film, and his name is Rob Talek. He's known as the priest hunter in Canada. And Rob makes a very good living suing the church. He's done he's done over 400 civil cases against the church, and the lion's share, he told me, the lion's share of his cases are the Roman Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. He does cases on Boy Scouts and Anglican Church and these other things, but he says the lion's share of his business comes from the Roman Catholic Church, and he asks the question out loud: why is that? What is so different about this one particular Roman Catholic Church that's different from the other? And he puts it at celibacy. So he believes that it's the celibate priesthood that is a big part of the problem. But as far as I know, I'm not in the trenches like the lawyer is. I'm not in the trenches like the survivors are. I sort of use my documentary camera to sort of document a story that was unfolding before me. It was a really interesting story. It was like this one man, sort of if I did a movie trailer version of the film, you would start with in a world, but in a world where 99% of these cases settle, one man refuses to take the church's money, and he takes the church to court. And that's the story we had in our film. This guy named Rod McLeod was abused decades ago, and he finally had the courage to come forward, and the church played hardball with him. The church dragged him through 4 or 5 years of litigation and mediation, and couldn't come to an agreement, and they offered him money. They offered him money to sort of not go to trial and make this all public. At 2 points in the film, they offered him, the first time was $600,000, and the second time was $1 million, and those were massive settlements that would have basically kept the court or kept the story out of the public trial. And had that happened, we wouldn't have the documentary Prey, and we wouldn't have this landmark historic settlement or historic award that a jury of people came back and said, listen, we've heard all the evidence. We sat in the trial for 3 weeks, and we think the church has done wrong, and so we award Rod $2.6 million. I mean, it's a dramatic thing that happened, and I just happened to be at the right place in the right time.
Okay, so what do you say? So we're having a very provocative and interesting conversation, and that's before anyone actually sees this documentary. Would you say this is your most potent documentary?
Would I say this is my most important documentary?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been making documentaries for 20 years. I've been working in television for, I guess, almost 25 years. And I've done, I've done, 5 or 6 features and a lot of, episodic documentaries. But this is something that has sort of tapped into, I think, a bigger international story. I mean, it's a small story that barely got reported on when it happened, but it's a local story that has international, an international outreach. And we've been screening it at festivals around the country. It's screening in Europe right now. It's in Italy, doing a bunch of cities and stuff. So I've been pleasantly surprised that people are sitting down and wanting to watch a documentary on clergy sex abuse, because it's a hard documentary to watch, but I think at the end of the day it's uplifting, and I think people walk away encouraged.
What are some other projects you've made that you're proud of?
Oh, I've done a lot of stuff. I mean, I make social issue documentaries, and sometimes I just make documentaries on things I'm interested in. I did a documentary 3 years ago called "How to Prepare for Prison," and it was based on a fear I've always had, and that's going to prison. So I sort of focused on people who have been convicted of a crime, are about to go to jail, and they're still living on the outside. So these are mostly white-collar criminals, people who, stole some money, people who, there was one guy in my film who was found guilty of marijuana cultivation when it was still illegal. And so they were facing, 1 year, 2 years, 5 year sentences, but they were still living on the outside. So I documented their journey while they were still living on the outside and preparing to go to prison. So I followed them around for months as they got their their lives in order, and explained to their families that Dad's going to be going away for a bit, and this is what we need to do. But it was so I do documentaries like that, and then I've gone the other road where I've just done documentaries of stuff I'm interested in. I for a while there, I was playing poker at these underground clubs in Toronto and stuff like that, and so I started to interview all these guys. They call themselves grinders, and they play poker for a living, and it was just something that I was interested in, and you sort of follow that story for 6 months, and those are like I'm really proud of those films, but with Prey, something else happened that was a little bit there's a little bit of magic going on, I think.
Cool, yeah. So how long have you been making projects, and how did you get in the film industry?
How did I get into the film industry? Well, I started in television. I mean, I went to the University of Windsor, and I took a communications program that had a film element to it, and I made little short films in high school and at university, and then I was lucky enough to get a job working on a kids TV show on CBC called Street Sense. It's no longer on the air, but it was just like this sort of low-rated national TV show for teenagers, and it was shot in shot all over the country. There were field producers in Calgary and Vancouver and Toronto and Halifax, and so I was one of these guys who sort of went out and told these 3-minute stories. So it sort of introduced me to the world of film and television, and it sort of got my foot in the door of broadcast television. And so from there, I mean, I didn't want to. I mean, as much as working in children's television was fun, it wasn't particularly something I wanted to be doing forever. And I always wanted to make documentaries. And so I had this eccentric uncle who lived in downtown Detroit in one of the worst neighborhoods I've ever seen. And Uncle Terry was the black sheep of the family. And so I sort of did a documentary, a very personal documentary on my uncle. That's it was just it was a half hour long, and it got into some festivals and got me some recognition, and from there I sort of was able to sort of get into the door of commissioning editors and broadcasters who were doing documentaries in Canada, and so I pitched some other stories and got some other films off the ground. So, but it all started with children's television.
Okay, so did you enjoy Spotlight? What can you say about that film?
Yeah, I mean, Spotlight. It was it was a groundbreaking film. I mean, I like good dramas. I lean towards documentaries when I'm looking for something to watch. But Spotlight had a certain sense of realism, and it was a true story, and I like that. I mean, the people in the film, I've actually met the lawyer who chases down the church in Boston, and I met the real life guy just a few months ago. But it's sort of I was very fond of the film.
Yeah, it's really good. I love good movies about investigative journalism, just like the
For sure.
research, putting it together, whatever it is. Obviously you want like some sizzle, but yeah, I thought that was a really, really solid movie. So when will people be able to see Prey?
Well, Prey has been doing the festival circuit in Canada and around the world, but so we're broadcast on TVO last night, but it's now being streamed for free on TVO.org. Anybody in Canada can watch it for free anytime they want now.
Okay, well there we go. Now we know. So what
Yep.
what can you say about making documentaries in Canada?
Making documentaries, it's a tough thing. I mean, it's very hard to get a documentary off the ground. It's very hard to get a documentary off the ground that is financed in Canada. I mean, there's a few places that we can go to get green lights. One is CBC, one is TVO. You can go to the National Film Board, but it's always hard to make a film in this country. However, it's incredibly rewarding, and making documentaries, making documentary films is a great privilege. I feel lucky all the time, but it's never going to make you rich. You're never going to be a millionaire, but it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done.
Good. All right, Matt Gallagher, thank you very much for your time and telling us about your documentary Prey and a bit about yourself. What do you have planned for the year 2020?
I want to do an easy documentary. I want to do something happy. I want to, a guy who I met at one of the festivals was telling me a documentary idea about elves in Iceland.
Ooh.
And he was telling me that 40% of people living in Iceland believe in elves. And I thought to myself, man, that's an idea that I want to look at. So I'm going to start researching that idea and see where that goes.
That sounds lovely. Well, thank you very much for your time, Matt.
Okay, Michael.